Hey, Tom.
Hi, Michael.
So what I'm going to do now is it's linked to TCO4, right?
Okay.
So with TCO4, I'm making quite a lot of changes to the way I guide them on networking and office choices, and where they pick sectors to join if they're eligible, right? So now what I want to do is in the next four podcasts, I want to talk about the four big changes at McKinsey, very big changes,
Okay.
that are driving the advice I'm giving the TCO4 participants, so Dylan, Harris, Cisco, and Cezanne, right?
Okay.
Let's start with the first one, right? Now, the first one is so McKinsey focused on three things. They don't want to be a strategy firm. They want to be a leadership firm.
Yes.
They came up with that in the 80s, and people still call them a strategy firm, which means that their marketing wasn't so good. Well, no, not true. For the market that actually matters, they know the difference.
Yes.
Remember
Yes.
that. The market, the kind of people who call McKinsey a strategy firm is not McKinsey's market. And if you look at McKinsey's website, they call themselves a leadership firm. BCG and Bain call themselves strategy firms, right?
Yes.
And the 1980s called and they want their marketing text back. Something like, can you imagine Barack Obama making a joke like that, right? But anyway, so that's one thing. The second one is that so the first one was this marketing one, was around being a leadership firm. The second one was that they would, when people left the firm, they would place them. They would work actively to place them in industry, so they created this army of evangelists, right?
Yes.
And the third one is that when people left McKinsey, they left in high standing. Because when you left McKinsey in high standing, it's like when you graduate from the Harvard Business School, they don't disclose grades.
Yes.
You could have hired the dumbest HBS graduate. They're really the dumbest one, the one who fell asleep in class. But you don't know, right?
Yes. You have no idea of knowing.
It's a clever strategy, right? Education is a level playing field, especially at HBS when they don't disclose grades. Now, think about that. That means that when people recruit HBS graduates, they are forced to recruit the dumbest person because they don't know who's the smartest person. It's a brilliant strategy, don't you think so?
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense. Second, because your profile has now improved, you want to be associated with HBS, right? Because they're not saying anything bad about you. McKinsey has basically adopted the strategy, which makes perfect sense if you think about it, right? When you leave McKinsey, they don't say how you left McKinsey. You left in higher standing.
Right.
You leave as, and like, imagine riding shirtless on a white steed. Imagine you actually airbrushed your abs and you got a six-pack or an eight-pack going there, right? Now, I mean, I'm not being sexist, ladies. You can also have a six-pack if you want to, right? But that's how you leave McKinsey, right?
Yeah.
I always tell people, how do you know you're not talking to the most ridiculous McKinsey consultant in the world? You don't know that, right? How do you know you haven't hired the most ridiculous McKinsey consultant? You don't know that. And now think of the enormous value to McKinsey. Firstly, when you leave McKinsey, they make it sound like, you know what? Just being here was an achievement.
Yes.
Right? It's like, single people can use this as an example when they date. You date the person for one night and you say, look, just being with me one night is a magnanimous achievement. It is something that most people aspire to. And I think that you should feel very proud that we managed to spend those 8 wonderful hours together. And now I'm going to release you into the world well-trained to live your life. But basically, that's what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
Then they have this entire army of people who will help you with your resume and will, guide you and connect you with people. And you also have a network of McKinsey people who realize that if you land well, they look well, because a McKinsey person must never look to be weak, right?
Yes.
So they've built this mechanism where you feel good when you're managed out. You feel good when you land because the firm makes you look like a winner.
Yeah.
You feel good when you go into industry because the firm says, look, he was a McKinsey consultant. He was one of our, he was a great guy. You should hire him. And they don't even have to say that explicitly because the mere fact that they connect you with people is an implicit endorsement.
Yes.
And that's a brilliant model. It's a brilliant strategy because then you create a very loyal cadre of people
Yes.
who want to be attached to the McKinsey name. When they go into industry, they want to support McKinsey because let's assume you work at a bank and there's McKinsey, BCG, and Bain consultants. You want McKinsey to do the work because then it helps your status because your firm is doing the work, right? So in my opinion, that's probably one of the most brilliant things McKinsey did. So anyway, McKinsey has now changed that strategy. Now, I'm just going to point out a few things here, right? Dominic Barton is Canadian, right? So I like him, right? I mean, I like him, I like bacon, and I like maple syrup, right? They're probably in that order, right? And maybe ice hockey is fought there, right? Now, I'm pretty sure that one day, when you go for the Canadian citizenship exam, one of the 24 questions is going to be who was the Canadian business professional who ran McKinsey and Company worldwide. He's that revered, right? Because I mean, he grew up in some, little town in British Columbia, went to the University of British Columbia, went on to Oxford. He's a very nice guy, right? You want to like him.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying anything negative about him. It's not about him. I don't know if this is an official policy at McKinsey. If it's an official policy, then even though he's a great guy, he's mismanaging the firm, right, to some degree. If it's not an official policy and he doesn't know about it, then he's also mismanaging the firm because something like this is happening under his watch, right?
Right.
So either way, when you are the leader, the buck stops with you, right?
Yes, it doesn't matter whether it's on purpose or not.
Exactly. Now, I'm not going to mention the office where this is involved, right? But there's an office in the north of the United States, let's leave it at that, which has now been telling McKinsey consultants, the ones that are up for being managed out, right?
Yes.
That if you are managed out and someone does a reference check on you, we will tell the person doing the reference check that you do not leave in high standing. Now, this may seem like a small thing, but this completely shatters McKinsey's business model.
Well, that's huge.
It is so big. I think I had a heart attack that day, but I'm not sure.
Wow.
It is. When people say, how does a great firm die? It dies from the hubris and stupidity of a bunch of well-paid executives who run the firm. I always tell people when a firm dies, two things are happening. Either the firm does something really ridiculous, or the market shifts. Now, the market is shifting to China, so McKinsey has to deal with that, and they're not dealing with it very well. But this shatters their business model. Because now you're going to have consultants who are leaving the firm, and first, to get the title of leave with higher standing, they have to resign. McKinsey is forcing resignations.
Right.
And if you don't resign, they tell people that you left without higher standing, right? Now, it's possible that this is just a ploy, that they're never going to do it, but they're forcing people to leave early. But then that also raises another problem. What kind of firm is misleading people to get them to resign early?
Yeah, if it's not an actual real change, like you're talking about, you're just implementing the same process differently. Like, why would you even make that change? You don't even need to do that at all.
Now, my belief is that I spent a lot of time over the last few weeks contacting every bookstore in the United States to see who bought Sarah Palin's book, Going Rogue, to see if they decided to go rogue at McKinsey, right? And they just couldn't give me the names. Apparently, there's confidentiality agreements in the United States. But if a senior director of recruitment is going rogue, it is unlikely that no one knows about it.
Right.
It is very unlikely, because I know about it. And I know a lot of people at McKinsey, and I checked with a couple of people. People were quite surprised when they heard about this. It happened in one office. It happened quite recently. But the implications are quite shattering for me. One is that, let's assume it's McKinsey policy and they're testing it in this office. I cannot understand why they would think this would be a good policy. Maybe they can see something I cannot see, right?
Well, it seems like if they have a problem whereby there's people that they need to release not in high standing, that the real problem is that they're letting them in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're letting a lot of jerks. That's normal, right? That's normal. You can't screen so well in interviews. That's why you have the up and out policy. But the problem is that if you start releasing people, let's assume this is policy and they're testing it. You're going to create two classes of McKinsey alumni.
Yes.
Those who are not released in high standing and those who are released in high standing.
Yeah, the haves and the have-nots.
Now, the have-nots are not going to be your friends.
Hmm.
And worse, McKinsey damages itself. Because it's basically telling people, well, we released some people that are not good, and here they are. Come on, journalist. We've given you a list of people you can interview that are predisposed to say negative things about us.
Yes, yes.
But more than that, why would these people want to hire McKinsey in the future?
And why would they want to speak well about McKinsey to other people who might hire McKinsey in the future? It just seems like an accident waiting to happen.
It's an accident waiting to happen. Now, if it's not McKinsey policy and there's a rogue director there, also it's not a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't be doing this without anyone knowing about it. So clearly enough people are condoning it.
Well, the only way, like it might be, depending on the timeline, if this is playing out right now,
It's playing out as we speak.
Right. So it might be in the middle of people realizing what's going on and deciding to either support or react.
It's happening right now, but it's played off over the last 6 months.
Hmm.
So my feeling is that one of the things I noticed about Dominic Barton is he's a little bit like Ron Daniels in the sense that he's allowing McKinsey to experiment with many things.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? And say he probably doesn't know about it. He can't know everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest. He can't know everything.
Yeah, the firm is too big.
But what worries me is that people think that under his leadership they can experiment with these things.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things should not be open for reinterpretation.
Right.
The only thing that it was ever remixed and sounded better was, Deborah Cox's hit, Nobody Was Supposed to Be Here.
No.
Thomas Gordon introduced a lot of hip-hop music.
I'm going to have to Google it now.
That was like the only song ever that sounded better remixed. Now, you don't take McKinsey's policies and remix it, right?
Yeah.
You don't take his values and remix it because they don't need to be remixed. They don't need to have a millennial spin attached to them. Millennials, just so we know, don't like to be treated badly when they're fired. Just so we're clear about that, right?
Right.
So saying we're doing this for to make it better for younger consultants makes no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this exit policy thing, if it's, I know McKinsey partners listen to this podcast. I would implore upon you not to do this, right?
Yeah, it seems like a bad move. I don't know.
I would send out an email. I know this. I know that the head of recruiting will listen to this. I would implore upon you to send an email to all of your directors of recruiting to find out who is doing this. Then you publicly execute them. Like a Game of Thrones episode.
Oh my.
And then you take their head and you put it on a spike, like what they used to do outside the Tower of London. And then you embalm it so that people can watch it for centuries, right? Now, obviously, I'm referring to this figuratively, right? Not that you actually would do this.
Yes, but it speaks to how strongly you feel about this and like what you think how serious this is.
One thing that always, people always said that when Rajat Gupta did what he did at McKinsey, McKinsey would have collapsed. McKinsey wouldn't have collapsed. Because while Rajat Gupta did what he did, it was really an isolated incident. Mm-hmm. Right? It was an isolated incident. He did. I'm sure a few partners knew about it, condoned it, and so on. But it was isolated, right? Mm-hmm. Now you may think, but that's bad. What did they say? The fish heads, the fish rots on the head first.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a nice saying, but the reality is that when you have these little fires breaking out in a company, it's even worse. It's the broken windows theory.
Mm-hmm.
If people see this is acceptable, well, lots of other people do other things that are not acceptable.
Right, right.
When you have one leader who's very visible that you need to isolate and kill, you can save a company.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a tumor just in one part of your body. You can get rid of that thing.
Yeah.
But if you've got little tumors breaking on all of your body, you can't do much about it. That's why, to me, this is a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's under the radar. It's not getting attention until it's going to cause so much trouble. Now, this director is training other recruiting people. They think it's normal. They'll talk to other recruiting people.
And the practice will spread, yeah.
But people say, but Michael, it surely can never spread. It already spread. 2 people at least are doing it because I can see them copying on the email chain. I get all email chains. People send me everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I can't contact the director because he'll know how I've learned about it, right?
Right.
And then I'd break our confidentiality agreements, which we can never break.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, they have to stop this. They have to really gut this thing as quickly as they can.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It's another way to look at it is it's a sign of breaking away from the one firmness that kind of defined McKinsey so much.
And it kind of makes sense, right? What do the Chinese say? It's the third generation that always squanders everything. This
Right.
is the third generation of McKinsey, roughly speaking, right?
Hmm.
Or is this the second generation? It's roughly the third generation.
Yeah, second and a half, third.
They don't realize how hard it was to build what was built.
Hmm.
They don't understand that. I mean, sure, they're McKinsey partners, but every McKinsey partner thinks he's like God's gift to strategy, right?
That's just successful people in general.
Yeah, and I think that and there are times when you have to step back and you ask yourself, what exactly are we doing here?
Hmm.
Fine, you want to go into big data, not a big deal, right? Who cares, right? Fine, you want to start a recovery business, who cares? Fine, you want to start implementation, but that's okay. But what business are we turning into? And are we going to be happy? I have some back problems because I work so much, and it really shocked me the other day when someone recorded me, and I looked and said, "Is that what I look like?"
Oh.
You know what I look like? My skin is well preserved, like a piece of olive in a martini, because that's pretty much the amount of martinis I have, right? And it's not a compliment, but the point is that these things creep up on you.
Yes.
You don't know it.
It happens one little step at a time, and you never really see the moment when you cross the line.
I think that once every year, you should hire someone to record you for one entire day and play it.
Now, this is why kings used to have jesters, right? Like there would be someone who could come in and say whatever they wanted without fear of reprisal, so you could really have someone pull you out of that, what do you call it, that headspace where you don't realize what's happening.
I just thought it was because they didn't have HBO then, but yeah, it could
Well,
be that.
I may be thinking too much about this, but
No, you were right. The thing is this: if you look at every good leader, and when I say good leader, I'm not talking about shareholder creation, because honestly, you can lie and cheat and you can create shareholder value, right? But I mean,
Right.
good leaders that have really defined corporate world. Now, my opinion, a good leader is shaped by one person. Do you know who that is?
I can take a guess.
Who?
I would their life partner.
Exactly. If you want to look, my rule is very simple. If I'm meeting some famous executive, and his or her wife is not there, I'm a bit concerned with this person.
Huh.
Because when I do business with people, I only want to meet their life partners. I don't care who you are. Your life partner is the most important. I need to see this person. I need to spend time with them. I need to understand them. And if you look at all these really great leaders, they all had very strong life partners. There's a very famous story when Hank Paulson bought a Burberry raincoat because he ran out of. He had this really ratty-looking raincoat, right? He came home. At this point, he was the CEO of Goldman Sachs. He was earning a lot of money, right? He's extremely wealthy.
Yes.
Right? We are both semi-retired, but I think he's retired in a very different way than me. But the point is, he buys this raincoat, he comes home and he shows it to his wife and she makes him return it.
It was too extravagant?
No, the moral of the story is that successful leaders know when to take instructions. It's a very important lesson. They have someone that they listen to all the time. It's not their board of directors.
Yeah.
Think of Jamie Dimon, who I like as a leader as well. He's very close to his wife, right? He's always doing stuff where they're always talking about it and so on. Marvin Bauer, he always talks about his wife. Now, we're still at the age where we've have to see strong female leaders. And I think now it's not so nice to talk about their husbands, but we'll see more of that. I'm not saying you have to be married to be a good leader, but you have to have a significant other. Maybe your mom that you take advice from, right? In fact, that's true. I mean, a lot of Indian leaders cite their mothers as people that they bounce ideas off and so on. So here, you need to be grounded a little bit. And I think that the issue to some degree is that how grounded are these leaders? At a certain point, if you're too successful, it gets to your head, I think.
Yes, exactly. And that's why you need someone completely outside of that universe.
Now, before everyone starts telling me, Michael, it's just one thing in one office, just a crack. Have you ever looked at a windscreen that has a crack on it?
You don't want to drive in that car.
Can you fix a tiny crack on a windscreen?
Yeah, no.
No, you have to replace the entire windscreen eventually.
Yes.
It's the same principle. I mean, people look Rudy Giuliani as, I don't want to talk much about anything about politics, but he did one good thing. He saved New York City.
Mm-hmm.
People forget what New York City was before Rudy Giuliani came in. It was a disaster.
Yes.
You couldn't go into Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't. You'd get raped or worse. New York was a disaster. Times Square was a place you went to watch a peep show. Right? It was a terrible place. Rudy Giuliani came into the broken windows theory, and amongst other things, and he fixed New York City. Mm-hmm. Look, he, despite what people may say, because he's not a politician and not everyone's going to like him, he fixed New York City. Give him credit for that.
Yeah.
New York City was an absolute, unmitigated disaster before he came along.
Mm-hmm.
New York City was one of the few major cities in the world that actually had a population shrinkage before he came in. Do you know that?
Of people were exiting.
People were leaving the Big Apple. They took a bite of it and they realized it was the poison apple. And they left. I mean, think about it. A major city like New York City, so a shrinkage in its population.
Yeah, that's just a symptom that something is really
if
wrong.
That doesn't scare the heck out of you. What is going to scare the heck out of you?
Yeah.
And he fixed it. Broken windows theory. Small things like this replicate.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of going viral we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Make
exactly.
sense?
Yes, it does.
Any questions?
No.
Somewhere this week, a McKinsey recruiting director is not going to be having a pleasant day.
We will see.
We will see, right? See, right?